Do you think Nicolas Sarkozy's vision for France is sensible or scary? Former French President Nicolas Sarkozy wants to be the president again, and he's laid out his own vision of what he wants for French society. He's called for a total ban on the burkini, for all immigrants to speak French, and for France to never allow things like separate swimming sections for men and women. Something, of course, we've already seen happening in Luton. The 61-year-old politician has told crowds that minorities have been given far too much say in society, and he'll reclaim France for the French. He's been cheered by some and criticised by others as sounding like a far-right racist. Well, France is our closest democratic neighbour, so I'm interested to hear your reaction to this morning. Do you think Nicolas Sarkozy's vision for France is sensible or scary? For anyone unfamiliar with the way France deals with religion, the French state has a rule called licite. Forgive my pronunciation. What it means is that people of all religions are not allowed to display religious symbols in public. An example of this in action is that children and teachers in schools are not allowed to wear headscarves or, if they're Christian, crucifixes. However, critics argue that France has always been much more heavy-handed when it comes to Muslim religious symbols, whilst taking a lighter touch when it comes to Christians. In short, they just don't apply the law in a fair way. And now, Nicolas Sarkozy, well, he's just pushed this bias one step further. So I want to hear your views this morning. Do you think Nicolas Sarkozy's vision for France is sensible or scary? Dr. Taj Hagi is the director of the Muslim Educational Centre in Oxford. Good morning to you. Thank you for coming on.
Good morning.
What do you think of Nicolas Sarkozy's vision for France then? Is it sensible or scary?
Well, I'm no fan of Sarkozy when it comes to his right-wing foreign policy and economic policy. But when it comes to his social policy, I don't have any issue. The issue here is that are Muslims going to be integrated citizens of Europe, or in this case France, or are they going to be isolated citizens? And I firmly believe we should, when in Rome, do as Romans do. And now this issue about dress, we really need to understand it. This issue of dress doesn't come from the Quran. The Quran doesn't mandate that a woman should be covered from top to toe and only her face and hands sticking out. That's come from the so-called hadith, which are the sayings of Muhammad that were written down 300 years after his death. The Quran only talks about modesty. So here we have a situation where these misogynist priests, these mullahs, are telling women what to dress, and they have been duped and tricked into believing that they should cover everything, and then they claim it's their human right. I think, for example, last night I wanted to go to my local swimming pool here in Oxford. And I was all ready for that, came to the pool, no one in the pool, but I couldn't enter the pool because it was women's only night. I mean, what type of nonsense is this? If we either have a gender equal society or we don't. And I think Sarkozy is right there, that, we should actually, in Europe and in this case in France, should go ahead and create this gender equal society and not import all this misogyny, sexism and chauvinism from the Middle East.
Isn't it going to upset an awful lot of Muslims, though?
If Muslims are going to be upset, they need to show me, as a scholar of Islam, where in the Quran did it say that women should cover everything except their face and their hands. And they can't do that. They always refer to the hadith. But these, like I've said, these hadith were written down 300 years and more afterwards. I mean, Muslims should follow the Quran. When they follow the Quran, they have no issue living in this society. The issue it becomes an issue when they want to mix up culture. They mix culture, conflate culture with religion. And we should stop doing that. We should become British Muslims, being, in other words, an Islam that's rooted and relevant to this society and not to the Middle East. And in Sarkozy's case, they should be French Muslims who are rooted and relevant to that society and not related to Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Yemen, or whatever the case may be. Muslims in Europe should become Europeans. Otherwise, they should actually pack up and go. When in Rome, do as Romans do.
Yes,
when in Rome, do as Romans do.
But there are many Muslims, I'm sure, who are listening to my programme. We discussed the burkini ban yesterday on my programme. Muslims who consider themselves to be British or French or European, but who just happen to want to wear this item of clothing.
Where did they get that idea from? That idea, they didn't discover it by themselves. This comes from a masculine clergy that said, women can only be modest according to A, B, and C. In other words, cover everything. That is the misogynistic view that sadly women have been duped and tricked into, and now they are running with the ball.
I have been told that in France, many Muslims feel as if the state, the government, is picking on them constantly. Many Muslims feel as if they are being sidelined and they are no longer feeling part of French society. At a time where ISIS want to divide us all, is it sensible for an influential politician like Sarkozy to really play into their hands?
ISIS is not going to be with us forever. Please, what is going to be with us forever is the whole idea of Muslims in Europe. Are we going to become integrated and become part of this society and become, a productive members, or are we going to always ask for exceptionalism? We are going to be different. We want our special swimming pool times. We want our special meals. We want this, we want that, we want this. Always what we want and not what we want to give. And I think Muslims need to understand one thing. If they want to be part and parcel of this society, they need to adjust and adapt. For example, Indonesia is the largest Muslim country in the world. How did they become that? Because when the first Muslims went there, the mystics and the traders, they adjusted and adapted and integrated with that society. They didn't bring on Arab culture and impose that on that society. Now we have the revivalism of Arabism. Arab culture, wild bushy beards, the hijab, the niqab, the burqa. None of these things are mandated in the Quran, but somehow it's been repeated by the clergy. And the clergy is actually following Goebbels, Hitler's propaganda minister's tactic. The tactic was, the bigger the lie, the more you repeat it, the more the people believe it. And this is what is happening today.
Stay where you are, if you will, because I want to bring Khalil Charles in, who lives in Hertfordshire. He's a spokesperson for the Muslim Association of Britain. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Jonathan.
Morning. So as you've heard Dr. Taj Hagi say, he doesn't have any problem with what Nicolas Sarkozy is saying. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. If Nicolas Sarkozy is purely saying that it's time to reclaim France for the French, then there's nothing wrong with it. Do you agree?
Well, I think you have to put Nicolas Sarkozy's comments into context. He is trying to fight another election to become president, and he's rather worried about the far right of Marine Le Pen, and so therefore a lot of his comments are in the context of trying to sway the people who seem to have taken the policy as it normally is to blame everybody else for the woes of your country. When the government can't deal with their own situation, when they can't deal with their economic and their social problems, the best thing to do is to blame the outsiders and blame those who are.
Well, surely what he's saying things that he thinks the French people will want to hear.
Well, he's saying things that the French have said for years and years and years and have come unstuck with it. If you look at the French history, there's been a plethora of riots and violent overthrows, but due to the kind of suppressive nature. I mean, on the one hand, they talk about libertarianism, they talk about secularism and freedom, but actually the imposition of secularism and freedom is no different from the imposition of the ISIS type of ideology where everybody has to do what they're told. And so, therefore, the French colonialism, which is based on the ideas of assimilation, whereby somehow you become French at the end of the day, is something which I think it's dangerous and it's continuing in the kind of rhetoric you hear from people like Sarkozy and indeed Marine Le Pen.
But France is France. People that are born and bred in France are French people. What is wrong with saying this is the way people live in France? Everybody who lives in this country needs to adapt to that, and they need to live in a similar kind of way. They need to follow the rules.
Like anything else, if France was France and France didn't get itself involved in the 18th or 19th century in colonialism, whereby people of different cultures were suppressed were murdered and treated like second-class citizens. And then there's fairly decent argument that they would have to say, or we can say purely French in that sense. But no, France has been built up by the colonial states that is taken control of in Africa, in Asia, and other parts of the world, and therefore the rights of those citizens have always been a question of dispute in France, and that's why you saw something like the Algerian War, where essentially they were trying to fight back against this culturation and assimilation of trying to be French. And I think what I have to point out is that Britain has always had a far different policy in terms of respecting others, respecting individuals, respecting cultures, and this is what I think is the tolerance that Britain has shown over the years. So
do you think we've got it right then, and the French have got it wrong?
I think we are getting it far righter, as if that's a phrase, than it's happening in France. And I think that the comments made by your guest just show that people do have their own rights to behave and act in the way they want to, provided they're not breaking any laws. And I think that the whole question is that this system of respect and understanding that people do have their own individuality, they have their own identity. A Scotsman and a Welshman and an Englishman and an Irishman are different people, but they come together in order to form the United Kingdom. And I think, within that we have to accept that our people of different cultures, Poles, Czechs, etc., Italians have come into this country and are contributing and making a very positive contribution to the British society.
Dr. Tajhagi, do you think that we are getting it right and the French are getting it wrong? I mean, do you think we seem to be, as a country, more understanding, more accepting of different religious groups and their various needs?
Yeah, on the whole, we are getting more right than, say, the French. But the point here is that all of these symbols of Islamic fundamentalism, like the beard, the burqa, the face mask, the hijab, and all of this stuff, this is the Trojan horse, as far as I'm concerned. Do you think that these Islamic fundamentalists would be just satisfied with that? No. The next step is, ultimately, like Anjem Choudhury and other wacko people have said, the Islamic Republic of Britain having the Muslim flag flying over Downing Street and Buckingham Palace. The point is, we need to understand one simple thing. Muslims need to integrate here. And integration does not mean you lose your identity, but it does mean you leave your cultural baggage at home. Because culture has got nothing to do with Islam. There's no such thing as Islamic culture. There's such a thing as a Muslim culture. For example, you have a Pakistani Muslim, a Peruvian Muslim, a Patagonian Muslim, a Polish Muslim. They all have different cultures, but be Muslim. And so we need to create a Muslim culture here in Britain that is not related to Saudi Arabia or to Afghanistan or Yemen. Let them do it their way there. We need to do it our way here, and that would mean that we would need to adjust and stop having this segregated gender apartheid at swimming pools here, and having, for example, gender apartheid regulations. You, the presenter, and our listener there, or the other contributor, both of you and myself, we can't walk along the street with a balaclava and nothing will happen to us. Yet a woman can hide her identity. So what type of society are we creating? We need to understand. He talks about Italians and Poles coming here, but they're all coming together in a sort of almost a common cultural background. Muslims want to impose something that's sort of peculiar and strange that has nothing to do with the Quran, more to do with culture and misogyny and sexism, and they want to bring that and project that under the guise of Islam.
Khalil, it sounds very much then as if Dr. Tajhagi thinks that we should be less understanding of some of these symbols of Islam that we're seeing in this country.
In the Quran.
Well, if we choose to go down that path, then we might have the same kind of social discohesion that you see in France and some other European countries that are developing with those kinds of.
But can I just ask? Can I ask you? I mean, as somebody born and bred in this country, I remember when the only time you ever saw a woman covered wearing the burqa was if you went to Heathrow Airport and you saw people on interconnecting flights. That was the only time as a kid growing up I'd ever seen a woman wearing that kind of outfit in this country. Now, if you walk through the streets if I pop over to Asda in Dunstable, I will see women walking around wearing burqas. Now, why is it? What has changed in that we now, as a country, we've had Muslims living in this country for many, many years, but we seem to now have many Muslims living in this country who want to express their religion in a way that they didn't feel necessary previously.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing. I think where anybody can express themselves and the individuality. If you're gay, if you're transgender, if whatever, people shouldn't and ever be discriminated against for who they are and what they are. And therefore, I feel it's a backward step if you then try to legislate or try to make rhetoric that targets people for who and what they are. I mean, a woman who chooses to do that is entirely a free citizen, and I think that's what we should be saying here, and that's what we should be saying in France. Because unfortunately, the burqa has.
But do you think it helps? You talk about integration. Do you think that helps with integration?
I don't believe that integration means assimilation. I think integration means that we work in harmony, respecting the differences. It's
well, that's where you and Dr. Hagi, I think, have a very different opinion then, because I'm sensing from you, Dr. Hagi, you feel that assimilation is quite important.
Well, I mean, not assimilation. I'm talking about integration, and I think integration based on what is required for this country. I mean, your guest doesn't speak about the issues that I've raised, that, covering the face, covering the hair, wild bushy beards, all of the other sort of, superficial symbols, has got nothing to do with Islam. And these people should stop saying it's part of their religion and part of their culture. Unfortunately, British society, being so tolerant, and that's one of the great things about this country, they allow these people to get away with this stuff, and which is not part of the Quran. I mean, we should really have an Islam that's based on the Quran and not based on misogyny.
But even if it is,
coming from that part of the world.
Okay, but even if we work on what you say being true, then what's wrong with a woman, for example, being able to express a cultural identity in this country, even if it's got nothing to do with Islam? What's wrong with wanting to express that culture?
That's fine, but if you ask them all, why do you wear the burqa? Why you wear the headscarf? Why this, why that? They'll all come back to saying it's religion. So that means they've been duped, they've been tricked, they've been conditioned, they've been brainwashed. And then, sadly, these women would know no better because they don't understand the text, don't know the theology. They think, that must be true, so I'm better do that. And it's very strange that the women do all this medieval garb and the men are wearing latest Armani. You've seen it quite often. You talk about Asda and Dunstable. That same couple there with the burqa, the woman, and the man is walking with a shorts and sandals and an Armani T-shirt. I mean, so why did the women are pushed forward to sort of, save Islam, if that's the word, while the men can do what they want and be as fashionable as they wish?
Khalil, is this really the way we want to move in this country and indeed throughout Europe?
Well, you started by saying, is Sarkozy's comments, sensible or scary? They're scary, and also that the comments that your guests are making go along those lines. Because at the end of the day, you have to respect people. You have to respect their culture, whether it's religious or cultural or whether it's sexual. It's people are.
Why do we have to? Why?
Well, because I think if you move to a society where things become intolerant, then you're going to have a breaking point. You're going to have a point where people accept that racism and discriminatory ideas are acceptable, and that's the life we should.
And how would you respond to someone who says, well, actually, there comes a point when people take their religious expression or their cultural expression too far, and there's nothing wrong. We are, as a country in the United Kingdom, we are very welcoming to different people from different countries with different religious backgrounds, for example. But there comes a point where actually it's going too far. And I think that's what Dr. Taj Hagi is saying, that when women start covering themselves from head to toe in black outfits, when swimming pools are dedicating separate hours for men and women because the two cannot swim together, that's when things are going too far. And that's when it's perfectly acceptable for someone like Nicolas Sarkozy in France or a British politician to say enough is enough.
It goes too far when hatred becomes the word, becomes the mode of operandus. It goes too far where people are disunited, where they are afraid of one another, and we live in a society where scapegoating becomes the norm. That's when it goes too far, and that could apply to a Muslim or a non-Muslim. wherever hatred prevails, wherever discrimination prevails, wherever the lack of opportunity to be who you want to be prevails, you will always have a disunited and a dysfunctional society. And that's why I'm proud to say that in Britain we're moving in the right direction and always have, towards giving greater liberty to individuals and making sure that discrimination and far-right doctrines are a thing of the past.
There was no hatred at the beginning. Now there's coming hatred. Why? Because Muslims are insisting on exceptionalism, on their dress code, on all other sort of cultural things. Yes, I agree. This is a wonderfully tolerant country with no hatred. But hatred is now raising its ugly head. And why is that? It's because what Muslims are doing. For example, Anjem Choudhury is now finally behind bars, so to speak. How many of us collectively, Muslims, denounced him and that type of extremist ideology? Not too many, because secretly many Muslims actually believe in what Anjem Choudhury believes regarding women, regarding jihad, regarding ISIS, and so forth and so forth. I mean, we must really differentiate ourselves, distinguish ourselves from the crazy Arab Muslims of the Middle East, and have something different here. An Islam that is peaceful and tolerant, that's true to the Quran, and not the perversion and the poisonous manifestation we see in Saudi Arabia or in ISIS or in Pakistan.
I simply don't accept that anybody in the Muslim community didn't speak out about Anjem Choudhury. We've made it quite clear. Anjem Choudhury did all of his preaching on the streets because there was no mosque in the United Kingdom that would
that's
tolerate.
Not quite true at all. I think, where was the march against Anjem Choudhury?
It continued to be.
Hang on, sorry. If you both speak, I can't hear you one at a time.
And he was and continuing to be pushed by the media, who gave him that vent of publicity. So therefore, what you say is completely and utterly untrue. But the point here is, views like yourselves, where you feel a particular community is to blame for their own discrimination, that is unhelpful. Gay people are not to blame for discrimination against them. Transgender people are not to blame for the discrimination against them. Handicapped people are not to blame for the discrimination against them.
We have a choice.
And therefore,
we have a choice in wearing the burqa.
In the way that,
hang on again, if you both,
anybody who chooses to practice the religion or practice their own cultural behavior should be allowed to do so. And that is the beauty of the country that we live in. And that's why you see that France has so much problems.
Dr. Taj Hagi, you can respond.
I think we need to, distinguish between culture and religion. And for example, to equate people who are disabled, homosexuals and others with the same thing like, choosing to wear the face mask, choosing to wear a wild bushy beard, choosing to wear a dress that's really not conducive to weather here. For example, the Arab robe, that makes perfect sense in a hot climate. It makes no sense here in the middle of January and February. This idea that somehow we are, the cultural trappings that we must defend at all costs from the Middle East and import it here and bring it here. You're quite right. 20, 30 years ago, you never saw a face masked woman anywhere in the United Kingdom, only at Heathrow, as you rightly point out. Now we see ninja here, ninja there, ninja everywhere. How did that happen? This is because of an ideology coming from the Middle East, this misogynistic, sexist ideology, which is the perversity of Islam, imposing itself here, and women are made as to defend Islam. They have to wear the traditional garb, and like our friend here wears the latest Western fashion. And
you sound upset about all of this, are you?
Sorry?
Are you upset about this?
Yes, because upset. All my hard work, and I've been working 20 years in this field to get Muslims to be integrated, not assimilated, integrated in this society, to become, normal part of the society. No, but we now have in the last 20 years Wahhabi money, Saudi philosophy. For example, the biggest mosque, the most prestigious mosque in this country is the Regent's Park Mosque. Who controls that in London? This is the Saudi royal family. The Saudi diplomat controls that. So that means they give that perverse version of Islam and projects it as the norm. And we must reject that. We must send back all this Saudi, Wahhabi, fundamentalist culture back to their primitive homelands. I don't want that part of that. And the women here, if they've been given another option to see, listen, this is another side, no. They're only told you must cover, no cover, go to hell, no cover, in hell. So gradually the lie becomes a reality. And then they won't say, this is my culture. But they haven't been conditioned into thinking that this is Islam.
OK, good to talk to both of you. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Dr. Taj Hagi is the director of the Muslim Educational Centre in Oxford, and Khalil Charles lives in Hertfordshire and is a spokesperson for the Muslim Association of Britain. Well, we're discussing the comments made by the former French President Nicolas Sarkozy. He has laid out his own vision for what he wants for French society, and he's called for a total ban on the burkini, for all immigrants to speak French, and for France to never allow things like separate swimming sessions for men and women, something we've already seen happening in Luton. The 61-year-old politician has told crowds that minorities have been given far too much say in society, and he will reclaim France for the French. Well, my question to you this morning is, do you think Nicolas Sarkozy's vision for France is sensible, or is it scary? Lisa in Hitchin Tech say, how many of these people who feel they should be allowed to wear a burqa would tolerate public LGBT behaviour? Tolerance has to go both ways, says Lisa. Stella in Luton says, good morning, Jonathan. I totally and utterly support his view, and I sincerely hope that Great Britain will one day have the same approach. I do not see Europeans invading African or Asian countries and demanding they change the laws to suit them. Muslims have far, far better lives in any European country than in their own homelands, and it is time that they accept that our rules and laws should be obeyed and respected. If Muslims living in France feel discriminated, tough. Discrimination and unfair treatment affects all races, not just Muslims. Alan is in Milton Keynes. Hello, Alan.
Oh, morning, Jonathan.
Morning. What are your thoughts on this, then?
Well, to be honest with you, Jonathan, I'm not really quite sure where to start here, because I completely agree with what the Muslim from Oxford was saying. And the fact is, you ask, is it sensible? I mean, is the far right sensible, and why does the far right begin in the first place? The far right starts in the first place because of an extreme left. And the extreme left is, without doubt, far too tolerant of the behaviour of Muslims in this country and across Europe. And we all know there are good Muslims. We know that.
In what way?
In the sense that, for example, it's a one-way street in as much that if a person abuses or swears at a Muslim on a bus, for example, and we've been told there's been an increase in this kind of behaviour recently, then we as a nation are branded a nation of Islamophobic people. But
who has branded us as a nation of Islam? Sorry, hang on. You just made a claim. Hang on, Alan. You just made a claim. You just said that if a Muslim is abused on a bus, then the entire nation is branded as Islamophobic. I just wondered where you'd got that from.
Well, I read it in the newspaper headline. It said Islamic-phobic Britain. I can't remember what paper it was. I'm not saying this is a general comment.
Was it a far left-wing paper?
It kind of spreads this view that, obviously not everyone are insulting Muslims any more than Muslims are killing us in our streets. But nevertheless, you can't help but brand. People tend to get tired of the same brush, and we are called Islamophobic in this country. Generally, we are kind of called Islamophobic by Muslims. And yet, in reverse, if we start condemning Muslims in the same fashion, in as much that we're saying, they're raping thousands of women and children.
But do you not accept,
Europe,
Alan?
Then they say, well, it's not in our name. So,
Alan, do you not accept that we seem to be far less tolerant now of Muslims than of different religions? I mean, for example, you go down into North London and you see the Hasidic Jews walking around. Again, they look very different. Their hair is very different. Their outfits are very different to, say, your average British person. And yet nobody bats an eyelid. You don't get people saying, we should ban the outfits that Hasidic Jews wear. It shouldn't be acceptable. And yet there is increasing voices in this country that are suggesting exactly that for Muslim people.
Yeah, yes, I'll agree with you on that completely. But we shouldn't imagine because people are not saying certain things in public that they agree with it. Maybe this is the sign of being a tolerant society. we in Britain do tend to keep our mouths shut about things that we actually do not like or even hate. And this is a mark of this society. But that's not good enough for Muslims, because Muslims and Islam and many Muslim societies in this country, as the man from Oxford was saying, are actually funded by Saudi Arabia. 1 in 4 of mosques and community centres are funded by Saudi Arabia. Arabia wants to spread fundamental Islam, and that's what we've got in this country. And unless we wake up, Jonathan, to this fact, if Muslims are not prepared to come to our country and accept the Western way of life, then they should stay where they are.
But hang on one second. You talk about Muslims coming to this country. Many of if we, for example, look at Muslim women who are increasingly wanting to cover their bodies and cover their hair, those women are very often born and bred in this country. It's not that they've come anywhere else in the world to here. They're from here.
Well, that's what your former speaker from Oxford was saying, that their minds are being manipulated and brainwashed to believe a certain format, which seems to say this means you are a Muslim and this means you are not. I mean, who is it that says, do we in this country ever say that we are non-Muslim and they are Muslim? No. Muslims say, we are Muslim, you are non-Muslim. We are this, you are that, which leads to segregation and separation. This is what religion, in particular Islam, has actually the master's degree in in separation of people in their minds, and that's what's happening.
And if ultimately what you say, if you believe that to be true,
I do.
Okay, but do you therefore think it's a good idea for a politician, an important, influential, maybe in fact a leader, to say this kind of thing and to say that this kind of form of Islam should in some way be stifled and it should not be allowed?
Yeah, I think I wouldn't say the word. Sorry, I'm stuttering here. The use of the word being sensible, or is it right, or whatever. Personally, I think these are the wrong words. The fact is, this is inevitable, because in France, people have been murdered because they had freedom of speech. Now they've been run over by a bus and murdered because of extremism, and therefore this is the result. The result is, Jonathan.
But none of these murders, for example, have been committed by women wearing burkinis, and yet burkinis seem to be, the latest thing for people to pick on.
Exactly, because we're all sick to the back teeth, Jonathan, of Muslims coming over to our country and trying to change our society and maintaining at all costs.
But none
we
of
must accept their
But none of that has anything to do, surely, with the nutcase, for example, who mowed down innocent people in a bus.
Well, they're not all nutcases, as the person from Oxford said. We should open our eyes and see what's going on underneath. We are just simply seeing the superficial exterior of Islam. We are seeing the bits that we are primed to accept as being true. Underneath all of this, whether we like it or not, it is an extreme point of view, which is which has been given birth to Islam, whether you are born here or whether you are taught from abroad. And that's what this person from Oxford is trying to say to us. And I just hope people listen to what he is saying, because inevitably, Jonathan...
But do you think if what you say is right, and if we work on the basis that what Taj Hargi was saying is right,
yes,
that women... in particular, are being brainwashed by people who are taking a form of Islam that comes from Saudi Arabia and that part of the world, and are saying, you've got to cover up, when you go on the beach, you've got to cover up. By banning the outfit, are the French, for example, if we look at what decision they have taken in many parts of France, are they dealing with that issue in the right way? Is banning the outfit the right thing to do? Or ultimately, does that just send a message to all those women that France is not a very kind country? And if you want to change the behaviour, what you need to do is you need to get into the mosques and you need to change what people are being taught.
Oh, well, I just think that's completely impractical. No one's going to get inside a mosque and change their point of view. You can't do this with people whose minds have been completely brainwashed in the first place. We're kidding ourselves if this can happen. I'd rather see this happening in France than some something extreme English or extreme French suddenly walking into a mosque on a Friday afternoon and murdering as many as they can. Now, I mean, is it better to wait for that to happen, or is it good, as I think the person from Oxford was trying to say, that now we should simply say there is East and there is West. If Muslims come over here, then let them become as Western. We don't see the Polish or Romanians or anyone else coming over here actually threatening our Western way of life, because they already have it. The people what this is all about, Jonathan, is not about immigrants coming from Europe, because when they come over to this country, we see no difference in our culture change. We see no change in culture, no change in anything. It remains the same. What changes our country? What is changing the West? What is changing Europe? What is changing everyone? What is creating the far right and is getting further and further and further to the right, as the man from Oxford was trying to tell everybody, is because the extreme left will have its way and dig in and say, we are Muslims, this is what we believe, this is our life, and you must change because that's what we want. And even worse than ever, Muslims are trying to change simply by being Muslims and not integrating, not assimilating,
Alan,
which is a big difference.
We hear your point of view. Thank you very much indeed. You're entitled to it, but I wonder if you agree or disagree with Alan. Steve in Letchworth. Hello, Steve.
Morning, Jonathan.
Morning. What are your thoughts?
Well, it is a difficult one because I don't believe that anybody, no matter what religion you are, should cover their faces anyway. Because to me, it's a form of identity, you know. And the reason I believe personally that France has been targeted so much is because I believe that.
What do you mean by targeted? Targeted by whom?
Well, by ISIS, because of the way they've done the bombs, and I think it's like saying, well, you know, you're cracking down on Muslims. We don't believe you should. And that's why we'll give you some grief. That's why I believe that they've been targeted more than anybody at the moment.
So it's almost revenge.
That's what I believe, because it's like, obviously, we're quite a tolerant country. So if you think we don't have that sort of thing here, like banning people from is it the burqa, is it?
Well, the burqa is the full outfit. The niqab is just the facial covering.
Yeah. I think it's because we don't ban things to do with Muslims, as in like they do. Obviously, we ban hateful preaching, but we are quite tolerant because we have been quite soft with people who do hatred. You know, like there was the man, I don't know his name, the one who's called the Hook, and then obviously Andrew Chowdhury. It's taken us a long time. Well, in France, A, they're a soft target, and B, because they're not as tolerant as we are. That's why I think that ISIS are doing, or people who say that they are Muslims are doing what they're doing because of what they class as, I believe that they think that France is a racial country.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Steve feels as if the French moves to restrict Islam and to restrict expressions of Islam are provocational. Helen is in Welling. Good morning to you, Helen.
Oh, morning, Jonathan.
Morning. What are your thoughts?
I called you a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about the swimming pool, and I said then I thought religion should stay out of, public swimming pools. And men's sessions only were fine, but they shouldn't be restricted to a certain dress code. You know, if men want to wear speedos, then they should be allowed to.
Mm-hmm.
And yesterday, I was at Southend, and sitting on the beach in a deck chair, I noticed women wearing the burkini, and there's nothing offensive about it at all, you know, and I do think any extremism is wrong, whether it's right or left, and this person wasn't affecting me.
But I don't think anyone has said that the actual burkini outfit is offensive. I think the only criticism is from people who say they are worried and concerned about what the wearing of the burkini represents.
Right. I think it's no different to the hijab, really, because, you know, we're so used to people covering their hair, and I don't find that offensive. I do find it offensive offensive when people cover their faces, because I agree with the other caller that is part of their identity, and I find it really difficult to talk to with their faces covered when you can't see their expression, you can't see, but I think that we should be tolerant.
And do you believe then that the French are not being tolerant? And if so, what effect do you think that will have on them as a country?
Well, I do think that could be. I agree with the other caller. Part of the reason why they have been targeted recently by IS.
Because Muslims feel picked on?
Yes, but I do think that if that is the law in their country, people should abide by their law. I'm not a politician, I haven't made their laws, but I do think if that is the law and a woman goes to the beach wearing one, then she is making a statement. Okay. And I also agree with what you said yesterday, that if women feel so strongly about it here, they should actually go to Arabic countries and wear a bikini and...
Let me just clarify what I said yesterday, because yesterday I spoke to a number of women who said that they were so angry at the decision taken by the French to ban the burkini that they were planning to, or wanted to, encourage other women to go over to France and to stage a protest on the beach wearing burkinis. Now, I personally do not agree with that. I think it's if French women want to protest in their country about a law that their government has made, that's fine. It's not down to us, it's not down to British women to start poking their nose in to ultimately French government decisions and to poke our noses into what the French are deciding for their country. It's none of our business, frankly. And if the French started poking their nose into our laws, we wouldn't be very happy about it either. But the other point I made was that if these women who are saying they'd like to go over to France and protest, if they feel so strongly that this is in some way a women's liberation point, that as a woman they should stand up for French women, why are they not going over to Jeddah? And why are they not sticking up for the women over there who, if they show the slightest bit of flesh, get thrashed with a stick in the street? I wonder why not.
Agree. Yes, I totally agree with you. Yes.
Is it because the worst that will happen in France is you get a strong ticking off by the gendarme, whereas if you go over to Jeddah, the chances are they'll thrash you to within an inch of your life and then lock you up in prison, and you may never ever be able to come back to the UK.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
Helen, thank you very much indeed. Sean in Elstree. Good morning to you, Sean.
Good morning, Jonathan. How are you?
Morning. I'm well, thank you. What would you like to say on this, Sean?
It's just I spoke to your boss this morning, and I just gave him my opinion. It was a situation I was in. Last weekend, I was out shopping with Mum, and was in a supermarket, and there was obviously a Muslim woman dressed in all a black outfit, and she was there at the till. I think she was on her own, actually, to be honest. And everyone was kind of like looking and pointing fingers, and there's like women with little babies coming in. And the little baby boy is pointing his finger saying, look at that woman there. And everyone, it's kind of...
Where was this? In Boreham Wood?
It was local. Well, it was local, Jonathan, yeah.
Okay.
And...
But I've been in Boreham Wood. I've seen women wearing the burqa in Boreham Wood.
Have you?
Yeah.
All the little kids, she actually stood out as if he's wearing a yellow jacket, Jonathan. And that's what it was. Now, there's no, it's no problem with me because, it must admit, I don't often see it. You don't often see that when you go out. I don't, in my local area anyway. But, this particular occasion, it stood out, So
did it make you...
You get that fact where you feel kind of like everyone's like scared. Oh, that woman, who's that? Or what is it? Sort of thing, what is it or who is it?
So it was a sense of being frightened.
Basically, yes, Jonathan. Yeah.
That you and other, and what do you think you're frightened of?
It's unusual. I mean, I've got tattoos on my arms and whatever else, and if I go, people sometimes they look at my tattoos and look, the man's got tattoos. Everyone's got tattoos these days, but but in the same way,
it's kind of
a bit different. It's like
Yeah, but hang on 1 second, because Sean, surely you've got tattoos because that's an expression of you. It's an expression of. I don't know why you've got tattoos. I don't understand why anyone gets tattoos, but you obviously want to express yourself in that way. Now, that woman in the supermarket, she wanted to express herself in that way she would argue, for religious reasons, although, as Taj Hagi said earlier, maybe it's more about a cultural kind of image that she wants to create. But underneath the tattoos, you sound like a very sweet guy, and chances are that lady wearing the burqa was a very sweet woman as well.
Yeah, you're right.
So what's
there,
the
definitely.
issue?
It's kind of like, a uniform. Like, if you go and see a priest and you know that he's got the uniform that he wears, it's kind of, it just stood out, Jonathan. Basically that, and that's it. It really did stand out, and there was people saying, "Oh yeah, don't go there, go to the next till." And
Really?
Yeah, really.
What
yes,
people
really,
were saying that in Boreham Wood?
Yeah, they moved away to go to the next checkout. I'm not mentioning where it was.
No, that's fine.
It was local. It wasn't my local supermarket. It was a supermarket, and like I said, there was.
But was it? Be honest with me, Sean. Sean, was it a supermarket in Boreham Wood? I don't understand why you can't say yes or no to that.
Yes.
It was. Okay. That's all I wanted to know. You don't have to identify which supermarket it was in Boreham Wood. But I'm just interested because Boreham Wood is, North London, South Hertfordshire, multicultural place. Yeah. Lots of people from different backgrounds live in Boreham Wood. I'm surprised that seeing a Muslim woman wearing the full burqa, I'm surprised that it was, something particularly remarkable.
It was. And actually people changed to go to the next checkout. It didn't bother me because to me, it's just a normal person. Get on with whatever you're doing and get on with your day's life and everything else, Jonathan, But there's mothers with little boys coming in and, no, go to that checkout. And and it's kind of like a scary thing, isn't it, really?
Well, I don't know. I mean, personally, I don't feel scared when I see a woman wearing the burqa. But then maybe I've seen many more women wearing the burqa because if I walk out on the streets of Dunstable,
right.
you see women all the time wearing them.
Yeah, maybe you're a bit used to it than others. But anyone that hasn't, the woman that come in with her kids probably hasn't ever saw one in real life, only on the TV or something like that. And
would you rather women didn't wear it?
Sorry?
Would you rather women didn't wear it?
Well, I'm not sure, Jonathan, to be honest. It kind of says a message. Are they hiding something? That's the kind of message it's sort of giving off.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Sean, for your call. Why do you think people are rushing to leave Luton? Migration experts have looked at 10 years' worth of data, which shows that more people have moved away from Luton than any other town outside London. Top of the league when it comes to an exodus of residents are Newham in East London and Brent in the north of Greater London. And then it's Luton in dear old Bedfordshire. Well, the data shows that for every 1,000 people moving to Luton, 1,303 are moving away. The data shows that nationally, some of the places people have been rushing to move to in the last decade, places like Devon, Cornwall, Norfolk, Somerset and the Isle of Wight. Well, these more rural areas are very beautiful. But let's face it, I mean, if you want busy shopping areas, if you want leisure centres, parks, nightclubs, restaurants, and a cosmopolitan experience, well, there are a few places with more provision in our local area than Luton, for example. Plus, don't forget, the housing is more affordable than in other parts of the country. There are great connections to the motorways, to London, and of course our local airport flying all over the world. So my question to you this morning is, what do you think it is about Luton that is making people rush to leave? Mark Scheinman is a representative for the Green Party in Bedfordshire, and he's just moved back to Luton, having deserted it for leafy Harpenden. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning.
So you're from Luton originally, then I know you moved over to Harpenden.
Actually, grew up in Harpenden and educated in Harpenden, but at the age of 19 had to leave it because affordable rented accommodation for a single man didn't really exist in Harpenden. And I came to Luton from that period.
And you lived there for a long time. Then I know
Yes.
you went back to Harpenden and recently have returned to Luton.
Yes, yes.
So what do you think about Luton? I mean, why do you think people, it would appear, based on these figures, are rushing to leave it?
I think they're not really immersing themselves in some of the nice, fantastic things that we have in Luton. The variety of places to eat. And, you know, we can all discount all the numerous, far too numerous chicken places and that sort of things. But if you look out and see, you can see such cultural diversity from sort of Turkish to Caribbean to every kind of imaginable food. And it's not
But
just
loads
the
of
food,
towns have
it's
that.
everything.
But loads of towns have that now.
But Harpenden certainly doesn't have that. And, you know, I remember in Harpenden when we got our first Chinese. That was a miracle.
I was going to say, I mean, come on. I mean, Harpenden, you've got, what have you got? You've got Chinese, you've got...
one Indian restaurant.
You've got more than one Indian restaurant. What are you talking about?
There is one Indian restaurant in Station Road.
Yes, and there's also another one in French Row.
In French Row there, is that? Oh,
Yes.
yes, that's hidden out of the way, yes. But, you know, there isn't the choice and variety. Here we have different types of Indian restaurants, different makeups and generations of people that have brought it. We have so much more variety here in Luton.
Okay, but aside from
benefited
eating
that.
at restaurants with food from around the world, what else has Luton got to offer?
Well, Luton has large supermarkets, which some of the smaller places in rural places just don't have outside of here. It has plenty of stores. It has a market that is vibrant and sells lots of different things of great variety. People just need to dip in and try things.
And would you describe Luton as a beautiful, aesthetically pleasing place to live?
It's not beautiful. Our dear Borough Council has done its best to concrete over every single inch that's going. And I would obviously, as a Green, like to reverse that decision and put the park back into Bury Park when the football club leave it.
But aside from that, I mean, the housing. Is the housing nice in Luton?
I live in a very old Victorian house. My bedroom and living room is 17 foot by 17 foot. That kind of house just doesn't exist in many other places, even, you know, in more leafy places, because it's always cost versus the available space. And
there's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. You can get a lot of house for your money in Luton.
Yes, you can. And, you know, people should enjoy that. It's not a difficult trip to get out of Luton. We've got fantastic access to the rest of the world, and there is plenty to enjoy in this town. And if people look and absorb it, I feel they'll really enjoy it.
Gosh, you're doing a good job of selling this, Mark. I'm even getting a bit misty-eyed myself. I'm
Come on, I'll take you out for an evening meal. We'll see what that goes like.
Any houses available down your road with massive living rooms?
Yes.
Let me bring Richard in Luton into the conversation. Good morning, Richard.
Good morning, Jonathan.
Sounds nice, doesn't it, the way Mark's selling it? A cosmopolitan town. You got all the food from different restaurants around the world. You can afford great big houses. Architecturally, they're quite nice. Okay, there could be more green spaces, but it's a nice town to live.
Well, that's an opinion, but I'm afraid whatever I say, you'll say, well, why am I living here? And the reason is I'm still living here is because I'm stuck due to Luton Borough Council with what's going on next to me. As soon as that's sorted, which will improve the value of my property immediately, I will be gone. But I find Luton an embarrassment. If I'm away on holiday, abroad, whatever, and you get talking to people, say, where do you live? We always say North Harpenden, because as soon as you say Luton, they go,
You snob! You snob!
Look at the press. There's the violence in Luton, the deaths, this sort of thing, the filth in Luton. When you come off the motorway, our wonderful councillors put a piece of tarmac on a bump, really expensive, with welcome to Luton. I mean, it looks absolutely pathetic.
I'm a disabled man who late at night walks around the town centre and could be easily picked on, and in all my time in Luton, I have never been threatened, I have never had any aggression shown to me.
Well, the last time I was in the town centre in Luton, I went to the cinema. I would never go there again. There was a fight broke out. They had to evacuate the cinema. There were about 10 guys there, all drunk, and there was a complete brawl going on. That's all recorded. When I came outside, there were people being sick. There was filth on the pavements, and I looked behind me all the time as we walked to our car. I couldn't wait to get out the place. I would not go through Luton town, whatever, for any reason at all. It's just the most filthiest place I've ever seen in my life. And you've got one person to blame, the top of the council, Trevor Holden. That man should not be doing the job. If he was in a business, he would have his bum kicked out the door.
Okay, all right. Well, look. We're all entitled to our opinions on local authorities, but probably not very fair to single out an individual. The council are a collective organisation. No. Let's not go over that again. Let's not single out individual people. But it's very clear that you don't believe the council are doing a very good job in Luton. You don't believe they're keeping. Right, okay. But the council, they have made parts of Luton better, haven't they? I mean, St George's Square, much nicer.
It's filthy. You walk round there at 11 o'clock at night when I come out of the cinema.
Yeah, but you go to any town late at night, particularly on a Friday or a Saturday, you're going to get drunk people falling all over the place. You're going to get litter. I mean, even very nice leafy parts of Beds, Herts and Bucks, you'll get the same kind of problem.
No, I don't think so. Not like Luton. I mean, as you mentioned, some of your previous caller, he mentioned Bury Park. You drive through Bury Park, there's cars parked on the pavement, there's no policing, there's no traffic wardens. If you drive through there, I mean, God, how do people actually walk through there? I just don't know.
Well, I've walked down through Bury Park many times. It's all right.
I think it's the worst place in the UK. It's got violence everywhere. Look how many times there's killings and things here. It's just unbelievable. As I say, I'm from North Harpington, not Luton, and I can't wait to get out the place.
Mark, Richard's just undone all your good work. It sounds like a dump, the way Richard describes it.
I'm very sorry for him. He's obviously got a perception that, and will he be able to move into North Harpington if he wants to? Because, house prices there are horrendous, and that's not the fault of the council. It's just the price escalation that's happened there. So if you want to live within affordable limits, if you want somewhere that if you take it with open arms will give you a good welcome and you can enjoy, then Luton is the right place for you.
You must admit, Richard, there are some lovely people live in Luton.
It's not the people, is it? It's not the people. There are some lovely people who live in Luton. It's not their fault. You just can't get anything done in this town. And there's one person to blame, it's Luton Borough Council.
All right,
I'm sorry, but they are the worst in the world.
Right, it's clear that you have some issues with Luton Borough Council.
I've got files that you would not believe.
Yes, well, I'm sensing that. There's obviously a history going on there, so that's why you're so hostile. But
even the head of the council, sorry to interrupt you, again, Trevor Holden, he won't have an appointment with you. I've asked for an appointment, but you're just fobbed off. Everything in Luton Borough Council is fobbed off.
He's maybe sensing some hostility from you that is very entrenched.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Can't wait to get out of the place.
Richard, good luck. Thank you very much. And if you caught Mark...
I wish him luck.
It was all going so well until that point. And now he's made it sound like a dump. Hey, stay there, Mark. Sophie grew up in Luton and has now moved to leafy Dunstable. Good morning, Sophie.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. So do you miss lovely Luton?
No, I don't at all. First of all, I'll say I'm not racist, but I think the reason why people are leaving is because it's multiculturalism there. Extremists have come from Luton. It's very segregated in areas with Asians, Muslims. Britain First stirred up an awful lot of hatred there, and I think the whole world knows where Luton is. And to be perfectly honest, yes, it is a dirty town. It's violent. I don't feel safe there. And that is my opinion of Luton.
Has its own problems, is it?
Sorry?
Dunstable isn't without its own problems.
Oh, no, but I'm in the process of moving from Dunstable. Yes, Dunstable does have its problems. It has it in Tye Farm.
Yes.
And it's slowly integrating into Dunstable.
I was going to say, I mean, in terms of the biker problem that we experience in Dunstable, I, as someone who worked in Luton for 17 years and who have spent those 17 years, walking around in Luton town centre. I mean, for goodness sake, when I was a kid growing up, it was always quite an exciting experience to get taken to the Arndale Centre. But I don't believe I've ever felt as intimidated as I have done since we've moved to Dunstable in terms of some of the experiences.
Probably with the people, the bikers. Yes, I can agree with you there. But
my point is, you can experience that kind of thing anywhere, can't you? It's unfair to blame Luton for maybe a minority of incidents that you've heard about or read about.
I'm just giving you my opinion as to why you're asking why people are moving, and I think it's because of multiculturalism and the fact that extremists have come from there. Britain First has caused a lot of trouble, and it is a dirty town now.
Where do you want to move to, then?
Well, I'm going to go up to Scotland.
Right. Okay. Why Scotland?
Well, why not? I just fancy going up there, moving up there, that's all. I want to go as far into the country and as isolated as I can be.
But the rest of us have to get on with what we've got and make the best of it, and therefore to go around with a smile on your face and be enjoying something and talking and discussing with people, because you can have a conversation with people, catch a bus, and I'm often talking with people.
But ultimately then, Mark, are you not suggesting that you kind of walk around with this kind of fake grin? Look, it's lovely, we all live in Luton, we'd rather live somewhere else, but we can't.
It's not a fake grin, because Luton isn't without its problems, which obviously I politically want to sort out. But
which area do you live in?
I live in Stockwood Crescent, which is at the bottom of London Road.
Oh, yes, I know that, yes.
About half a mile from the town centre.
Yes, I was born up on London Road.
Oh. Yes, and there's some lovely
Do you like London Road?
There.
Sorry, did I like London Road when I lived there?
Do you like it?
Did I?
No, do you?
I don't mind London Road. You've got Stockwood Park. It's quite nice just to pop over there.
Some very good schools there, like Tennyson Road School and places like that.
Yes, that's right. But then going into the town centre, no, I don't like it. I mean, yes, I like Berry Park. I like walking down there. But and then, like I say, I'm not racist, but I'm just giving you my reasons why I think people are leaving. And if people were honest, I think they would say the same.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, Sophie. Stay where you are, Mark. Yep. You're my resident Luton defender. Marco in Luton. Good morning, Marco.
Hi, good morning. It's Mark, not Marco.
Oh, Mark. Sorry.
Sorry, Mark.
We're making you sound more continental than you are.
I've been working in Luton for the past 5 years as a courier driver, which I know Luton, I think, there's no postcode in Luton that I don't know. But basically, Luton can be a good place to live, but to be honest, for the past few months, I've been racially abused by someone. I'm not going to mention no names. I got the police involved. The police said they couldn't do nothing about it because there is not enough evidence. I was just 2 days ago on Wednesday. Today is Friday. On Wednesday, my van was broken into. My phone was taken. Right at the scene, I stopped a police car. I told them this is what has happened. The car was just leaving. The police could have chased the driver, but they're busy. They can't get involved. They've got another call.
But Mark, I mean, I'm sorry that you've been the victim of crime and you've been the victim of racism. That's totally unacceptable. But you can't blame Luton as a town for that, can you?
But who should have? No, my thing is the police were right at the scene. Next minute, they had their car parked on Farley Hill. I'm going to a corner shop. The people who said that, they are busy on the call, they were going to Farley Hill. There's a corner shop on, I think, near number, I'm not going to mention the number, on Farley Hill, Luton, near Stockwood Park.
Right.
That's where the incidents happened. So as a lot of people, a lot of women drivers are being attacked all the time. So a place like this, why would anyone want to come and live there?
Right, so you just feel it's dangerous. Thank you very much, Mark. Peter in Welling. Good morning, Peter.
Morning, Jonathan.
Morning, Peter.
Got to be honest with you, Luton is horrible. It's disgustingly dirty. It's just not nice. And a couple of years ago, I was answering a advert in Gumtree for an iPad. I arrived at where it was supposed to be, at the house, and it was a setup. And 2 young Asian lads tried to hold me up with a gun.
You were robbed at gunpoint after going to buy an iPad?
I didn't actually get robbed because I managed to, sort of, as he leant through the window pointing the gun in my face, I actually managed to slap him, backhand him across the chin. And as he stepped back, my son was in the car, he put the car into gear and we managed to get away. But it actually, I knew it wasn't a real, it fired like ball bearings. So he actually fired at the car and it left quite a deep dent in the back of my old Land Rover.
What, so he actually shot at you?
As I drove away, yes.
Oh, I mean, Mark, he's making it sound like the Wild West.
My young lad with me as well, he was probably 14, 15, and he was petrified. In fairness, the police were there almost immediately after calling them.
But you could get that in Welling, couldn't you?
I feel unsafe walking around Welling.
Do you live in Welling Garden or Welling Village?
Welling Garden City.
Right. But surely, there's the occasional, I don't know.
There's the old punch up on a Friday and Saturday night in the pubs, which you would expect that.
Bit of bloodshed at the Irwin Tea Rooms.
Exactly. But no, you can walk round. It's clean. It's not as if it's, it has its areas.
So have you ever been back to Luton after that experience?
I've only to drive through if I'm on work purposes, but I won't stop there. I wouldn't ever go shopping there. I wouldn't go, to an event there because, I just don't trust the town anymore.
Mm. Thank you very much indeed, Peter.
Is the clock ticking for me? Am I just waiting to be picked upon, or should I not hide away and keep on going forward?
But maybe you've been just lucky, Mark, that you haven't experienced violence or unpleasantness in the same way that some of my other listeners have.
Yes, yeah, but I must be lucky because I can't run away very fast to get away from a situation like that.
So you've never been held up at gunpoint or anything else like that?
Never, no.
Well, Mark, thank you very much indeed for doing your very best. As I say, it started so well. Your sales pitch was really good at the beginning. I could almost feel estate agents in Luton, their phones starting to ring, and within 20 minutes it's all been undone.
Yes.
Sorry about that. Thank you very much, Mark. Lee texts to say, JVS, I moved to Luton in 1989 with my parents, who managed a pub, which is now a block of flats. I met my wife and we bought a place in Luton and moved to North Bedfordshire in the late 90s. We moved out for a number of reasons, but I'm glad we did, as we wouldn't want to bring up a family in Luton, which is rife with drugs, prostitution, turf wars, racial tension. The list is endless, says Lee. Sophie says, morning JVS, my family and I moved from Muswell Hill to Dunstable 9 years ago and 6 years ago moved to Luton. We much prefer it to Dunstable. I'm a white woman and my husband is black and we fit much better in Luton than we ever did in Dunstable. The rental prices have rocketed in the last few years and that may be the reason for people leaving. Jason says Luton is a dump, which makes Corby seem nice. That's Jason from a nice Northamptonshire village texting in today. Nirka in Bedford says, I'm not surprised. There's always mattresses and kitchen appliances. It's a swamp. The whole town is a mess, says Nirka. Dan in Luton says, JVS, I've been in Luton for over 20 years. I have a flat here, but I now spend most of my time in the countryside with my partner, as Luton is getting worse and the town centre, says Dan, is a joke. One of the UK's biggest folk festivals has banned Morris dancers from performing with black paint on their faces. The steering committee of Shrewsbury Festival say they simply will no longer book acts who wear full black face paint. Morris dancers have painted their faces for around 500 years and they've defended the tradition, saying there are no racial connotations to the black paint and they've never intended to cause offence. However, equality group Fairness, Respect, Equality Shropshire, or FRESH, said the ban showed sensitivity to a changed social climate. And the organisers have released the following statement. They say we entirely understand the argument from Morris dancing communities that this is something that goes back to tradition. However, there are other ways of celebrating this other than blacking up, which has very strong connotations of racism. Morris dancers have performed with blackface makeup since the origins of the dancing tradition, which is thought to date back to the 16th century. Known as Border Morris, the tradition sees performers wearing a full face of black paint in order to disguise themselves. One theory is that it started when impoverished 16th century farm workers had to conceal their faces to avoid being recognised whilst begging during winter, as asking for money at the time was illegal. So considering the history, and considering historically apparently it had nothing to do with black people, do you think Morris dancers should be allowed to paint their faces black? Phone lines are open 03459 455 555. Pete Bradshaw is part of the Woodside Morris men who are based in Watford. Good morning to you, Pete.
Good morning, Jonathan.
Good morning. What do you think about this then? I mean, is it acceptable for Morris dancers to still paint their faces black in this day and age?
Yes, I believe it is. I should say that Woodside Morris men are a Cotswold Morris side, so that's a different tradition, and we don't black our faces up. But as you said in your introduction, Jonathan, it's a tradition that goes back many hundred years. It doesn't have racial connotations. I've danced with black faces in many different towns and cities around the country, and we've never had any issues. This was when I was with another side. It's a way of continuing an English tradition and celebrating that tradition.
OK, stay where you are. Let me bring Professor Ellis Cashmore in, who's visiting Professor of Sociology at Aston University. Good morning to you, Ellis. Thanks for coming on.
Jonathan.
So, as you've just heard, I mean, Pete Bradshaw says it's got nothing to do with black people. This is
I believe, Pete. I don't think it would have. You know, we're talking about several hundred years ago, before anybody knew that black people even existed. You know, the English were an island race, as they say, and they wouldn't have known about these things. So I do believe Pete when he says there are no racial connotations. The point is this: times change and traditions change. You know, we could say we had all sorts of traditions hundreds of years ago. We used to burn women where we suspected they were witches. But these things change because our sensibilities change, our tastes change, our culture changes, and it sensitizes us to how offensive these things can be. My view is simple, and that is that today, blacking up in this way is going to offend some people, a lot of black people, and white people besides. Will find this offensive. They will think it's a joke at their expense, even if, as Pete says, it isn't intended as such. The consequences are that people will be offended.
So why shouldn't those people be educated rather than Morris dancers should be banned from doing it?
Well, you try educating people and saying we're a bunch of Morris dancers. We dress up, and let's face it, Morris dancers are objects of mockery themselves in many respects. I don't want to sound offensive myself, but I'm just, stating that they do dress up and they dance in this, very idiosyncratic way, and people have poked fun at them over the years, as Pete will know. I'm not joining the chorus now, I'm just pointing out the obvious. And I think we've seen generations of Morris dancers without the black face paint. So this is going to come as a surprise to people, and I don't think you can really re-educate people and say, hey, they're blacking up, and this is part of a tradition that a lot of people have neglected, but it isn't offensive. Why is it necessary to do? Why can't the Morris dancers simply move with the times and say, well, we're dropping the blacking up simply because in this day and age, in the 21st century, it looks offensive?
Pete? It's not racist. It's not racist. However, many people in this day and age will perceive it to be racist. It will offend people, and that's why it's just unnecessary to do.
Simply, as I said before, the Border Morris tradition, which we're talking about, one part of the Morris tradition, it's a ritual dance, it's a ritual celebration, as in ritual dances all over the world. People wear different costumes and different makeup, and this is an example of that. And we're continuing to wear the traditional costumes and makeup going back hundreds of years. There is no racial connotations. I don't know.
Pete, may I talk to you directly?
I haven't had any complaints from any black people when I've been dancing 20 years in the past with black faces from black people. It's not an issue.
But Pete, if it could be demonstrated to you that this was taken as offensive by people, black and white, would you change it then? I know I'm accepting your point that this derives from a tradition that's many hundreds of years old, and it doesn't have any kind of spiteful intent, and it has no racial connotations. But nevertheless, here we are in 2016. If people are offended, would you change it?
I suspect, Professor Blackmore, that if for all the people that were offended by it, and I don't doubt there are people offended by it, otherwise Fresh wouldn't have brought this forward.
Yeah.
But for all the people who are offended by it, white, black, whatever, there'll be plenty of people of the same ethnicities who aren't. I'm very much in favour of political correctness. I've worked in education and in universities the same as you have. But I don't think this is an issue of racial discrimination or racial offence.
No, I'm saying just
it's a matter of tradition.
No,
we can't. I don't believe.
Let's just say it's offensive to people, though.
I don't believe it is offensive to people. It may be offensive to some people, obviously, because people have said this. But it's something which is a tradition, and I think it's something that we have to be very careful in any society not to throw all of our traditions away. We're very impoverished in England in terms of our folk traditions.
Well, I wouldn't say that. I think we have a very rich tradition culturally.
We are very impoverished compared to the other nations of the United Kingdom, I would suggest, in terms of dance. And we are struggling to keep these traditions alive, to get new dancers to come through. As I say, we don't dance with black faces. Many Morris dancers don't. There are different traditions. This is one tradition. It's ironically the tradition.
But if you don't, why should they? If you don't dance in blackface, why are you supporting the fact that they are? I know that you're saying that this is a tradition of theirs, but don't you think, for the sake of keeping the peace, it would be simple just to say to them, look, drop the blackface stuff?
No, it's a different tradition. Let's take another dance form. In some ballet forms, people wear very revealing costumes. In other ballet forms, they wear long tutu-type dresses. There are different forms of the dance. Some people might find revealing ballet costumes offensive. Should we stop?
Well, I haven't heard any.
On stage? Should we stop people cavorting on stage because people are showing flesh? No, it's a traditional form of dance. Ours is a traditional form of dance.
But nobody really has been offended by ballet in this way.
But why? What's wrong with offending people? I mean, surely there's...
Is it necessary, my question would be, Jonathan?
Well, it may not be necessary, but are we supposed to go through our entire lives never saying anything or doing anything that might offend someone?
We do that by accident, don't we? I don't think we need to do it by design as well.
But this isn't by design. But this isn't by design. They're not wearing the makeup.
No, it's in the public domain that there are people who are offended by this.
But they've got it wrong. They've misunderstood. It's not that Morris dancers are blacking up their face to take the mickey out of black people. It's got nothing to do with that.
Well, the people who invented gollywogs and children's toys, and Enid Blyton when she was writing her children's stories, there was no racial intention behind these things. But as the world turns, people then become aware that, there are implicit messages that are not so acceptable in the 21st century, so we simply change them. Nobody stops reading Enid Blyton, even though that they've been edited in a way that's more in sync with our culture in the 21st century.
Pete.
Jonathan, I think you make a very good point. If you consider the black and white minstrels, they were taking the mickey out of black people. They were impersonating black people. Maybe they weren't deliberately causing offence in their heads, but that was a deliberate attempt to portray black people in a comedic way. We are not doing that. We are portraying 16th, 17th century peasant English people dancing to celebrate what few things they had to celebrate: the harvest, the coming of summer. We're not doing anything that's about black people or any other race of people.
Thank you very much indeed to both of you. I think you've explored the issue quite adequately. Pete Bradshaw is part of the Woodside Morris men, who are based in Watford. Professor Ellis Cashmore is visiting professor of sociology at Aston University. What do you think then? Having heard both sides of the argument, do you think Morris dancers should be allowed to paint their faces black? Do you think that is reasonable in 2016? Or is it simply likely to cause offence, and therefore it's just unnecessary? James has called to have his say. Good morning to you, James.
Good morning, JVS. How the devil are you, young man?
No, I'm well, thank you. What would you like to say?
What I would like to say is that the definition of racism or sexism to me is saying or doing something which has malice intent. And that's the point, intent. To me, the Morris dancers should be, not a Morris dancer fan, but they should be allowed wear or do whatever they please. They're not intentionally being a racist or sexist. And to me, everything is going too bland, and people love to be offended. So I would say to the people who get offended, have a day off.
Right. Okay. But you see, if we work on the basis that there are obviously people who are offended, and if the Morris dancers can still do all of their dancing, I mean, I'm to be honest with you, I'm not really a Morris dancing fan. I find it all a bit embarrassing, men with their bells and their little sticks smashing one another. I don't really quite get it. However, they can still do all the rest of it just without painting their faces black.
Well, they can do, but then you're losing part of what makes them unique. You're losing part.
But not a fundamental part. I mean, the fundamental part of Morris dancers, surely, it's the tankards of beer, it's the dancing around, the skipping, the socks, the bells, the sticks, it's all those kinds of things.
But then it makes them a little bit blander. And that's what's happening in society. People are becoming bland because people either want to be mischievously offended or they don't understand racism or sexism properly.
You know what's just occurred to me? That another thing that I've seen a lot of Morris dance. I remember going to the Aldbury Village Day or something a couple of years ago, and they had some Morris dancers dancing outside the pub there, and one of them was this big kind of bearded bloke, and he'd got massive boobies. No, seriously, he was dressed as a woman, and kind of like a woman, and he got these big boobs down his top. I wonder if the transgender community said, we are offended by this man, quite clearly a man dressing up as a woman, doing this kind of dance. I wonder whether that would also be grounds for Morris dancers to stop doing that as well.
Well, like I said, I'm not a fan of it, but to me, you should wear what you want. We apparently live in a common law society, not a Roman law society. So to me, you should be able to wear what you like. There are obviously things which will genuinely cause offence, but like I said, people misinterpret what is offensive.
Okay.
Either through mischievousness or through ignorance.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, James. Dave in Linslade has called to have his say. Hello, Dave.
Good morning, Jonathan.
Morning.
What a load of piffle some speak.
What a lot of what?
Not a load of piffle people are speaking about some of the things.
Piffle.
The blackface Morris, the border Morris, is a serious thing. It's nothing to do with racism. It's actually nothing to do with ritual or anything like that. It comes from a time in Welsh border counties where the sides, in the winter time, they were men, they were miners, they were worked in engineering, and when money was short, they used to go out and perform for around the villages to make a little extra money. Now, the reason they blacked their faces with whatever they could get hold of was sort of whatever, was so that they wouldn't be recognised. But it's nothing to do with any other tradition called guising. It was purely, they were proud men, and they had black faces so no one could recognise them and accuse them of begging, which was a case for shame.
Okay, we understand that, and that was the origin for it. But if you take, for example, a whole load of Morris dancers turning up at a village fete somewhere, and imagine, for example, in 2016, that there are a number of black people going to that village fete to enjoy the festivities. If they, for whatever reason, don't know the history, they might look at those Morris dancers and misunderstand. They may well look at them and think these people are taking the mickey out of black people. They may feel offended. Isn't it just more sensitive not to do it? Because then you're very unlikely to offend anyone.
Well, if I could go back, I was a member of the Black Annis border side in Bedfordshire, and in the 80s we actually went to Barnfield College in Luton to dance. And as we went through the door, people were saying, "I don't believe this." We went in there, we explained, we danced. My wife explained to people, and other ladies there explained exactly what it was all about. And when everybody realised, they loved it. Now, it's a more masculine dance than the Cotswold Morris.
A more masculine dance?
Well, put it this way. The Cotswold Morris that you're used to seeing skip up and down. They go up.
They skip up and down and they bash their sticks together.
Yeah, well, the border Morris bash sticks together, but they've got a different way of stepping. And it's very open, very smooth, and a little more wild.
And a little more what? Wild?
Wild. Yeah, if I can explain, if you try looking on YouTube for a side called the Shropshire Bedlams, this was the side that were revived or started in 1975 by a Morris musician, John Kirkpatrick.
Yeah.
And they dance it, and he dug into the tradition, brought all the information out, and started this side. Now, if you watch them, it's one hell of a dance.
Thank you, Dave. Tony in Luton says, if you're offended by Morris dancers blacking out, then you need to get a life. Witch doctors whiten up. It's not racist, it's tradition. I get offended with cod pieces. Shoved in my face.